Anyone else? That intro? Anyone else?
That was a good one. Got me all pumped up and ready to go.
Okay, I think those intros make me so anxious. It's so funny. For our network, by the way, Megan and I are totally just talking shop, so this is going to be the most informal video ever. But we were debating on which intro to pick, and so like we were really excited to see what that's titled the Teach Better Rock intro. Did you feel like it rocked your world?
And then it ended, and we were here, so I don't know.
It was like
better,
Oh my goodness. All right. Hi, everyone. Rae Hewart, 6th grade math teacher in Central Illinois and Director of Training and Development for the Teach Better team. Who are you, Megan?
Megan Deegan. I teach 7th grade math in the suburbs of Chicago and also one of the lead ambassadors for the Teach Better team.
Love it. So cool. So we are live, truly. Hi, everyone, by the way. Jen's here. Nikki's here. Megan, you said people would still view, even though it was the middle of the day. And I was like, really? It's our ambassadors who are like going to come hang out. And look, you were right.
Here they are. They show up everywhere. They're awesome. They're always us.
Yeah, you're the most amazing people ever. But when we were coming live, truly, this is because, what do you think, Megan? Like a half an hour ago, we were Voxing. And when we were on Voxer, we were talking about, like, Megan had sent me a message yesterday or 2 days ago that I never got to. Sorry, Megan. And we were talking about like how we were going to run our classrooms. And we both interacted with the same question of how are we going to handle student conferencing and feedback? And so I was like, hey, can we hop on a call and talk through this? And then it was like, oh, why don't we just live stream it? So the title that we wrote for this video was truly exactly what happened, which was like, hey, can we talk about something? And it was like, sure, do you want to live stream it? That's literally what we're doing right now. So great to see everyone here. Megan and I are going to talk shop about whatever comes up. I think the focus will be primarily on conferencing and like classroom management of the world. And then if you guys have questions you want to jump in or share ideas with us, that would be awesome. So that's kind of where we're at.
Love it.
Megan, before we get started, and just for each other, I think we should like clarify the place that we're at in terms of like what's our district deciding, where are we at with that process. Do you want to go first with that?
Yeah. So we go, as a district, teachers go back or staff goes back next Tuesday, and then our students don't start until the 31st. So we have almost 2 full weeks without our students. And as of our plan currently is our parents got to choose between hybrid remote learning and hybrid. I think about like 30% of our district has chosen remote. And for hybrid, it will be staff will be in school all day, 5 days a week. Students will be there 5 days a week for 4 hours. And then they go home, and then we do an hour of e-learning with them. I feel like the important parts for me to add is that while in school,
yes,
I will have a group of less than 20 in my classroom for all 4 hours, all day, every day. So I will have the same group of 20. I only teach math. So what that means is I think will be 4 or 5 classrooms that contain students that are on my team. So when I am teaching math, let's say I'm teaching for an hour or math time is for an hour, I would be zooming into those other classrooms. So essentially, I'm only interacting personally with 20 students each day, and the other 80 or so that I'm responsible for are in other classrooms and will see me through Zoom, but won't like personally face-to-face, I guess, connect with me in a classroom.
So what Megan and I were talking about is like, it feels like while you're in a hybrid, it feels like you're actually just teaching remote, but your students are in the building.
Yeah.
Which is super interesting.
It is.
Tell me about like what that hour of e-learning after the 4-hour school day is. Like, is that still like time that you could use for math? Is that a different class? How does that work?
So as of right now, and this is not for sure, I'm thinking what that hour is going to be is probably when our students are getting like PE or so whatever our PE and health, because those teachers I think are all like, I think everyone's becoming classroom teachers. So like our PE and health being that our kids are staying put all day aren't actually transitioning to any of those. So I think some of it'll probably be that. I'm guessing there might be some of it that is, we have normally in our schedule what we call an encore class, which is like I do intervention or enrichment for math. So just reading, we have art, we have STEM and tech. And then we have like our kids have to take constitution studies. So I'm wondering if that'll be a little bit of that time too. I'm not quite sure what that'll look like. I think that during that hour, because we have them in person for 4 hours, I think that hour we don't have to Zoom or video conference. We can. I think it's kind of going to be optional and up to us what we decide to do with that hour.
But as like, in terms of our conversation, because we wanted to really focus, at least at the beginning, that was our mindset of like, how are we conferencing, giving feedback? Like, I wouldn't bank on that time. You're really like, you have an hour every day with 120 kids, most of them virtual, 20 of the kids are in your classroom and those kids don't change. Like that's kind of like the situation we're dealing with in terms of brainstorming around. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Makes sense. By the way, I want to say hi like to Lindsay because she jumped in here, and Dave. Still fun to see you guys. Thanks for commenting. Again, Megan and I are just brainstorming. So Megan, I'm in a different situation than you, different school district. We're starting fully remote. We haven't officially decided, but I have a feeling that we're going to run a full schedule for the day. And we have to do 3 live video sessions a week. So they're phrasing it like there has to be 3 synchronous days or moments of learning, and they need to be at least 20 minutes long was what's been communicated to me. So I actually won't see any students for the first quarter, but I think they're going to have us run our schedule and all those things in between. So when you and I were voxing earlier, we were talking about this idea that like you kind of had this mindset of being in hybrid, meaning that you were going to be able to interact with your students. And I'm like, I actually think you need to have the mindset that you're remote, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that's been crossing my mind is, so as of right now, I will not be responsible for the remote learners. So there will be, because there are going to be so many, and I'll be in the classroom 4 hours a day. There will be separate teachers for that. But I think my concern is what happens if like during the first 2 weeks, we have some parents decide that they don't want them in the classroom anymore and they want them remote, or, so I agree. I'm trying to now just think that I am plan for 100% remote and just kind of then tweak it to.
So when you're saying you're not in charge of remote learners, you don't mean the students going to the building every day. You mean the students who have said, no, we're going to fully learn digitally for this semester, for the year. That's what you mean. It's interesting.
Yes.
Did you catch Carly Spina's daily drop-in? I really liked.
I caught parts of it.
So the cool thing that Carly district did is that she gave like names to those groups that weren't like remote and hybrid and blah, blah, blah. Because I think that the confusion is really like either you've chosen to have your students learn digitally for the entire year or semester, whatever the decision was. And then this other, you're essentially choosing to be flexible because the hybrid could turn into remote. It could turn into fully in person. This is like essentially the flexible group that at the moment they're calling in a hybrid space. But like online learners are also referred to as remote, but those are like students that you're not responsible for at this given time unless they switch. Which makes sense. So interesting. Okay,
so many moving parts.
I know, and it's nobody's fault. And I think that that's kind of the point of our video, especially when we were going to talk in general, is like Megan and I are both taking the approach that we can only control what we can control. So when you voxed me, I didn't feel like you were like, oh, I don't agree with this model, because you were like, well, I don't know that this is my first choice, right? But like, we could literally spend the next hour talking about why this is not the right choice, or we can just be like, yeah, this isn't my first choice. So how am I going to do it now, right? So like, let's be more solution minded and figure out how we're going to do it, which is why I wanted to brainstorm with you because I don't know how I'm going to do conferencing either. And we're in similar situations. So let's start with basics. So we both use the grid method. Are you going to use the grid method?
Yeah, I'm redoing like a lot of, I usually have videos for my notes. I'm going to redo those to make them more in depth, since I feel as though they're going to rely on those a little bit more heavily this year than I would normally like. And I think I'm going to add in some more practice at times and maybe more, I don't want to call it assessment, but like check-ins than I have, because I really want them to know for each skill, you know, if they feel comfortable and they feel like they've mastered it.
I agree. I am in the same boat. So I feel like my grids are going to be a little heavier than usual. And we actually had talked about that in Voxer a few days ago too, where I was like, I'm glad to hear that you're redoing some of your videos, because I haven't always necessarily redone my videos every single year, especially if I'm teaching the same content. But every year in every unit, there's always like a video that I added wrong, and so the answer is different, or like a video that doesn't play right. And in the moment when you're in class, you kind of just triage it in the moment where you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Just skip it. Or, oh yeah, I forgot about that. You're right. Thank you for finding that mistake. And you like give them a house point or whatever. But right now I'm like, I really cannot afford to have these videos have any mistakes. At least I don't mean to put that much pressure on myself, but these videos really do need to be comprehensive for students. And that doesn't mean they have to be long. I just want to make sure that there's like multiple videos that are labeled very specifically so the students really feel like they know what they're doing, because I can't immediately triage as quickly as I'd like because they're remote. Because sometimes I feel like I triage like students being confused simply by like seeing their facial cues. And if I can't see that, I'm trying to like be as practical as possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it really does. And I'm actually glad you just said that out loud, because when you said like, it doesn't mean your video has to be longer. And I think I need to get that piece out. Not that that's like, oh, I have to make 15-minute long videos. But I think that's really where I need to go, is it's okay for me to have more videos, but targeted specifically. So maybe I need to break up some of my videos and make them more, you know, specific to just, you know, this concept, and then just this concept to be, I think that is the angle. And I don't know that I had that thought prior to this. So.
Well, yeah, because I know both of us, so we both teach math at different grade levels. We teach similarly, but like in each box of the grid, it's like you introduce an idea, you practice an idea, and there's some sort of way for the student and or me to check that you understand the idea. So like that's kind of the model. It's not perfect, but in my head, that's kind of what I'm working towards. And to learn the idea, that first part, it can be 2 or 3 videos if it needs to be. But in my mind, I want them between like 3 to 5 minutes, and I want them to be like really specifically labeled. So I'm planning on like going over a key concept, maybe like reviewing vocabulary, doing a problem, and then maybe the next video is like extra practice guided by your teacher. So then it's like I go over like 3 more problems that, you know, are similar or different or whatever, you know. So that way I would normally maybe do that in like one 15-minute video of going over the concept and then going over example problems and then maybe recapping. But I think I'm going to split those up into 3 separate so they're short and sweet for students.
Yeah, and I think that also offers because I mean, like one of my biggest things about the grid is the kids don't always need me to teach it to them, which is great. Why I love the grid. And so I kind of actually really love that, because like, let's say they watch the first video and they're like, okay, I got this. Well, maybe you don't need the second video with me guiding you through more examples and you're ready for the assessment or the mastery check. Maybe then you do the mastery check, you realize, okay, maybe I need more practice, you know, and you go back. And so I think, yeah, I do think that is a great explanation of it. And I think, like, again, we teach middle school. Like, my kids don't want to listen to they don't want to listen to me stand at the front of the room for 15 minutes. Yeah. It's the same on video. They don't want to. So I think like keeping it shorter is going to keep that attention and also keep them moving and make it feel like they're accomplishing more in a short amount of time, which I think it's important for that age group. Like, they need to feel like they're completing things and not like, and they're more likely to rewatch it because it's short.
I agree. And that's what I was going to say is like, not only in the initial learning, but as they move through the grid, if they're like, oh, I don't remember this concept. If you've labeled your videos like really specifically of what they are and you keep them short, they'll, like, I always say, like, we'll go back to that video. That's a quick 3-minute review that they can have at any point throughout the grid or at any point throughout the year. Like when we get into I don't know, like 3D shapes and they have to use decimals and fractions, I don't reteach decimal and fractions. I actually link my grids that were about fractions and I link my grids that were about decimals and say, if there's any concept that comes up, you already learned these skills. Like just go back to the resource that you're already familiar with, go check this out, and then see what questions come from that. So the more specific, the better. I know we've gotten a lot of comments. I haven't really been reading them yet. I apologize. We'll get there soon. But I think that's like shorts videos. I'm going to redo them. Yes. Like we talked about, and just make them really specific. And I like that idea of even having like if you do one video where you like introduce the idea and then one that's more guided practice, then you could even choose, like you could say, and at the end of the last video or at the beginning of the next video, like in this video, we're going over guided practice. If you're not feeling confident, then let's go through these together. If you are feeling confident, pause here. Why don't you try the guided practice without me? And then fast forward to see if your answers are right. Like they don't have to watch the whole thing, but that can be, again, another layer of support and check that they can have.
Yeah, I really like that. I think that that's a great way to go with the...
So then they have practice, and then there's some sort of formative assessment. And that's kind of where we were at in terms of sometimes those formative assessments are like doing, I don't know, like a Google form that tells them the answers. Do you use iExcel? We use iExcel a lot.
I did last year because we had like a free pilot of it. So this year I'm gonna have to rethink that option. But yeah, I did. I actually use quizzes a lot because it's something that like they can redo multiple times.
Yeah.
And so like we get very used to, usually it's 80% or higher. So we get kind of used to that and that get them in that mindset, and that helps. So I use that a lot.
Well, with the formative assessments, I know you and I, like we have a blend in our grid of a formative assessment that really like the students doing on their own with the support of like a tech tool, like the technology tools being like, you got this right. And then we also have some formative assessments where they check with a peer and their friend is saying, you got this right. Or they look at a key and they're like, you got this right. And then there's others that come frequently, but appropriately, where they're actually checking in with us. And sometimes that check-in is like a quick glance, a sign off, and like a words of encouragement. Sometimes it's a more in-depth conference. Do you do all that too? I'm pretty sure you do.
Yeah, I do. I was gonna say it's pretty much the same as that. So
yeah, because Lindsay asked, one of the comments I saw that was coming through is, I'm wondering what's your favorite way to conference if you were face-to-face? Is there then any part that you can create virtually? Lindsay, that's exactly the same mindset I think I wanted to have when I was talking with Meghan, is I wanted to figure out, like, if we were doing it this way in person, what's the virtual equivalent? And then what hurdles come about that we can brainstorm through? So this is actually exactly where I wanted to be. Do you want to start here? How do you run your conferences usually in general? Like perfect classroom, face-to-face, how does that usually go for you?
So normally it's when, obviously like when they need help, but mainly when it comes to the maybe assessment portion of it or the mastery check portion, it's really like just a lot of times, like I'll check their work, and if they're good to go, again, it's okay, and I'm always, how do you feel about this? Is there, even if they're getting it all right, how do you feel about it? Is there anything you feel like you don't get, or you feel like you need more practice with? If they're missing things, then it's kind of breaking down, like what part do you think you're struggling with specifically, and where do you need the help? I think I can do that virtually. My concern is that normally face-to-face, normal day, I see, let's say max 28 kids in a classroom.
Right.
Then even remote learning, I was like, when we were doing that from March to whatever, I, through email or through Flipgrid, I was answering questions with kids. Now though, I'm teaching math to all 100 kids at a time.
Right.
So I have like an hour a day where I'm reaching all 100. That's like my concern is like, if it were kind of the same where it was, okay, an hour I'm with this group and then an hour I'm with this, like, or 45 minutes, like that I could figure out. It's blowing my mind, or at least getting me really stuck on the fact that it's all of them at one time. And I know they're not all going to need help at one time. And I know there's other teachers in each of their rooms, but those other teachers aren't math teachers. So I don't expect them to necessarily be able to help and explain the way that I can. And so I think that's what I'm struggling with.
So I want to get to that. Before we get to that, because I feel like that's like the FAR goal that we're trying to solve in terms of like the immediate. So I think we can work up to that. Face-to-face in my classroom is super similar to you, Megan. Students essentially use their tracking page to show that they need something from me. So I use the color orange. So they change their tracking page orange to be like, I need a teacher conference. And sometimes that teacher conference is like 13 seconds, and sometimes it's more in depth. We use those formative assessments. Like, I like to phrase them as like, we use them as notes for our conference. So if they're coming to me with even just like a quick exit ticket that has like 2 questions on it they had to solve, for me, it's the same with you, Megan. I'm kind of repeating what you said. It's not so much what's on the paper, but what they can tell me about what's on the paper. So I tell them all the time, like, I will look and I'll see if the answer is right. And if it's not correct, I'm giving them different feedback to go back and readjust or use their notes or ask me a question or whatever. If it is right, though, I don't just aimlessly sign it off and they move forward, but I'm asking them, like, how did you do this? Like, I actually, more often than not, if it's right, give them the impression that I think it's wrong and they need to like prove to me it is. And so we jokingly, obviously this is a culture I build in my classroom, but we like to like debate, like we fight to the death is like the phrase thing we use all the time of like, I'm confident this is right, Miss Heward. You are wrong. I know I'm right because of this evidence and this is what I did here and blah, blah, blah. And like, it's just super fun. That's why I love teaching middle school. So we do the same with like our end of level assessments that are still formative, but they're like formal quizzes or tests, is that they have them done, but they come to a standing table usually after like signifying and showing that they need support with that orange. And we just like use that in a discussion. So sometimes I'm conferencing with the student on one-on-one. Sometimes I'm conferencing with like a small group of like 6. With the size of my standing table, I didn't really go more than 4 to 6 because it's just a small space. But I love conferencing at a standing table because I don't want students to get comfortable. Like right now we're like debating, we're talking, we're giving evidence, we're questioning each other, like all that stuff. So that environment means that not only I have to see what they have, but they have to feel comfortable explaining it to me, which absolutely needs to be taught and coached, by the way. That doesn't just happen. People listening, it doesn't happen all the way on its own. But on the flip side, a lot of my conferences are collaborative. So I not only need to see what they're working on, but other students need to see, because more often than not, like Megan, if you and I were in a conference together, I'd be like, Megan, can you look at Candace's answer for number 2? Your answer is different. Why is that? And so I'm not telling Candace or you who's right, but I want you to look at Candace's work, compare it to your work, and tell me, why is there even a difference? Where was the initial mistake made? And then I'll have Candace jump in. I'll be like, Candace, so she identified this change. Do you think that your change is right or Megan's? And we fight to the death. It's super fun. So that's the part that I'm also trying to figure out too, that, I mean, especially with the number of students you're going to have, it's not only that you're checking it, but how do you create those organic conversations and discussions as well, which is super important. So I just wanted to give that context for Lindsay, because she asked, and I think that we eventually need to figure out virtual. Megan, if you had all your students working like in their normal schedule, but virtually, how were you originally thinking that you would be doing conferences? Like if you had like first hour, second hour, like normal schedule, but remote.
So what I was kind of thinking was doing out of the 5 days a week, where maybe 2 days I'm Zooming with them or, whatever with like the class, and, whether it's going over a concept or something like that. Now in an hour class, I don't need an hour to Zoom with all of them and go over something. So I think, if I'm going over, 5 or 10 minutes, but then have like set times, like 9:05, 9:10, 9:15, where they can sign up for a conference, to where I would try to build it. We have time, obviously, just for general questions, or like, a kid is on orange. Okay, like I need a conference with you. Those things just come up. but then make sure that I'm actually giving each student, okay, here's, 5 minutes that's dedicated like just to you. And it doesn't even have to necessarily be about your grid or what you're working on, but here's 5 minutes dedicated to you. Like, how are you doing? Where are we at with everything? What can I be doing better to better support you? Because I think that that's super important too, is me figuring out, what is it that you need more of? And it might be related to math, it might not be. So I was kind of thinking of that model of like times that are dedicated to the students and then time that's just general for any of them where we're just kind of working through things and I'm there as support.
So I like that, but if you're seeing 120 students all at once, I don't think you have time for both of those.
Well, yeah, no, I don't think I do either. So my thought was almost because I guess in the the hour that I have math
right
for the day, I don't need to be zooming into all the classrooms the entire hour every day. So my thought was kind of to start with, usually I do a mini lesson anyways.
Right.
And I try to keep it like max 8 minutes with them or less. Yeah. So that was kind of my thought, was to start with that. That way every day, like they're seeing my face, we're doing, just a short mini lesson, then they're working, and I'm trying to figure out how I can build in, because I think I can still do it. I think I can still build in some of that individual time while still kind of checking in. Because the other thing is, like you had mentioned, you have your tracker. So yeah. I have those too. So that makes it 10 times easier for me to see right away when a kid needs me. I'm currently also at the point of that where I normally have a different tracker for each class.
Right.
Now I'm like, I need to be able to see them all at one time.
Yeah.
Because I'm doing math at one time. So
did you see what I did for my tracker?
I did. I need to look at it more though, in depth, and see, like I guess for me, I would have to like keep scroll, but it is what it is. I mean, it would make it easy for me to check it. And that's kind of it. Like just
but the only thing for you, Megan, and again, I'm thinking about that tracking page. I'm sorry, we're kind of all over the place in terms of this, but you actually might want to separate your kids into different tabs based on the room that they're in. Because if you see like Susie in Ms. Jones's room is red, if you try and reach out to her and you don't hear something from her, then you could like call Miss Jones's room and be like, hey, get Susie on da da da. But if they're on a Google tracking, well, actually on the Google tracker, you could just note that anyway, I guess would be.
I could almost like chunk them, make like this chunk one color is like this sure. Because that's actually what I was thinking. I had them in separate, and even the tabs work too, having them.
I just wanted to be able to zoom all the way out and see all the things. That's why I wanted them all in one.
Yeah, I do like that too, because that is, I can make it.
Yeah.
I can zoom all the way out and probably still see them all at the same time. So.
Yeah, or at least just be able to easily scroll through things. I think it's interesting because I'm seeing a lot of the comments. Sorry, we're like half in this conversation and trying to read your comments. The idea of like having a space where students could post questions in Flipgrid and stuff like that. I like all of that. I think the biggest thing is like it has to be intentional and you have to incorporate it into their routine then. Because for example, like if you have a place where students are asking questions in Flipgrid, but they only go there when they have a question, then no one's going there to answer them, right? So if you are going to do that, I would encourage everybody to like, maybe there's intentional time that they all go into the Flipgrid and they all try and answer as many questions as possible. Or maybe there's something built into your grid. That's what I was thinking for you when you were talking about some of the things you want to do. Like rather than just leaving it up to chance, maybe we start putting these things in our grid. Like before you get to a video, there is something that says they need to go do something, whether it's go book a time to check in with Miss Deegan because within the next 2 days she wants to meet with you and like they're scheduling a time with you, or go and answer 2 questions in Flipgrid, like really making it intentional. So it's not just another resource out there that everyone will forget about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I love that too, because I had thought of Flipgrid and I was like, oh, that would, because I used it because I couldn't video conference from March to June. So I used that. But that was my thought too, is I was like, okay, it'd be great if like kids could even answer each other's questions.
Yeah.
But the same thing is, how do you, like, you could post a question on Monday and nobody looks at it. So, I mean, I would look at it, but like nobody else looks at it till Tuesday. So
the other thing is, depending on what the question is or who the student is or your style, on the tracking page, you could always comment on the box, like turn your box red, and then you add in the comments, like, here's what question I have. And then that's going to send an email to every student on that tracking page, like notify them that somebody added a comment. So that would give them the opportunity to then respond in the comments, and you could monitor that whole thing too. And mark it resolved when they feel fine. So that's also an option.
Yeah, that is an idea. I'm gonna have to play around with that a little bit. Because again, I love the collaborative. I mean, that's what normally happens. So that's kind of another thing, is how to building that in virtually too.
Or I know, Megan, they're being taught by teachers, not being taught, but they're being monitored by teachers that are not math teachers. I wonder if there are just a few, it's just so tricky, like what benefit it brings for them to check with a key, what benefit it brings them to check with somebody who doesn't actually have a math background, maybe, or what benefit does it bring for them to check in with you? Some of the things that I see is like, it'd be super cool. I don't know how it would work logistically, but I pull groups all the time, but I do it based on the tracking page. And so I wonder if there was like an easy way for not only students to sign up to meet with you, that they're advocating for themselves that they have to meet with you, but also for you to like organically pull groups in the moment when you want to. I don't actually know how that would work.
I think I definitely think I could do that. Like, I can easily look at the tracker and be like, okay, I'm going to, like, I need to meet with Susie and Dan and somebody else. Right. And I mean, like, no matter what rooms they're in, I can Zoom with them and make that happen. So and I do think that that's an option. It's more or less like I need to figure out, which I'm glad, we're sitting here chatting about this, because it's really just logistically figuring out how this all plays out and how it all works. And it's not going to be perfect, which is fine, but just kind of having some sort of plan for that. I do think that's an option for me.
I'm like a paper pencil person. So I think what I'm going to do is have like have you guys, I'm sure, Megan, you have like the old school grade books that like you write in the kid's name and you have the assignments at the top and you like whatever. So I'm going to do that for me as a teacher on my end. And I'm going to track points of contact I want to have with students. So I'm not only going to track like moments that I've given them feedback, whether it's like actually in person or not, but also moments of like conferences I've had with them. That way I can look at the tracking page that the students are accountable for, but I can also just use my page to be like, I haven't seen Billy since Tuesday. I need to touch base with him. But with that sheet, I think that's going to help me a lot. And when I'm looking at the tracking page each morning, I think you're right that I don't know if I want to have students like sign up. I guess I'll have students sign up for time slots. I think I'm going to limit the number of students. Are you going to have conferences where you limit the number of students or limit it by topic? So like I could have it where from 9:05 to 9:15, I'm conferencing on 1D. So anybody who needs a conference on 1D comes in at that point. And I can organically change that based off my tracking page. Like if no one else is on 1D, I'm not going to hold a conference with that time anymore. But if I do it where it's like, okay, anybody who's on 2E, you need to log in at this time. I want to hear from you. I want to conference with you. I want to hear like all that. Then even if you have 3 kids, 10 kids, 15 kids, I guess it's really your viewpoint of assessment, which was another email I got today from somebody else, just being like, if you're doing an assessment and you're worried that kids are going to cheat, then you're too worried what's on the paper. If I have students come into the Zoom meeting and we're all talking about 2E and they weren't confident before they got on, but by listening to all the conversation of the other students on this topic, they feel more confident, I still feel like I met my goal of what I needed to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I actually think what I would do is when you're conferencing per topic, I don't know that I would limit the kids because But what you can do is, like, let's say you're conferencing on 1D and you get to the end and you can tell, okay, you've got like 3 maybe that are still like unsure. Well, then those are 3 that you can pull and do a separate conference with and break it down even further, or, figure out, it can be one-on-one, it can be all 3. So I think that conferencing by topic, because like you said, sometimes the kids are learning from hearing other people talk about it. And I'm okay with that. If you're learning, that is the goal. It doesn't have to come from my mouth for you to learn it. So I think that conferencing by topic is a great way to start it. And then as you need to go further, you can, if you realize there's, still kids that you need to work with.
That's what I'm thinking. I think that makes it easier. And especially for you, since you have so many kids, that gives you the ability to then maybe conference with kids that you wouldn't have normally like told them they have to sign up, but it allows you to kind of get everybody that needs you. And if you had that consistently, and like, what if every day, like they came in, they did the mini lesson, and the first thing they did is they saw the schedule for the Zoom calls for that day. And the schedule for the Zoom calls is, if you're on this square, you're conferencing on this time. If you're in this section, you're conferencing on this time. And then if you could leave yourself, I don't know how this would work logistically, but leave yourself some wiggle room of like, for this half an hour, it's whoever needs me on an individual basis. So you can make that call every single day. So then they can kind of track their own 45-minute or hour class with you, where they do the mini lesson. They know that they need to be on a call with you at 9:15. That's 20 minutes from now. So I can go work. And then in 20 minutes, I'm going to pop in a Zoom call type thing.
Yeah. I actually have 2 things that as you were talking, I was like thinking of. So my question is, what do you think about this? So like, let's say I'm Zooming on 1A, and let's say, I've got 15 kids, and, after 2 minutes, one of my kids is like, nah, I got this. I don't need to be here anymore. Like, are you okay with them leaving the Zoom and then going to work?
So yes, absolutely. That's how I would do it in the classroom. The difference is right now we don't know our kids very well. So to be able to feel confident that they could leave that meeting, I really do need to get to know them, which is obviously the first thing we're going to do before we get to all of this. But in terms of like a normal conference, like when I pull a group, like there's been so many times I pull a group of 5, but then there's like 2 kids that clearly like got it. And then I'm like, okay, bye, see you later. And then we stay and we keep conferencing. So I think that can organically happen on a Zoom call as well, as long as, and again, this goes back to you as the educator, you have to really know your content and you have to know what questions to ask to feel confident that they're ready to move forward. Because so many educators I talk to aren't sure how to grade, or aren't sure what to do with an assessment, or aren't comfortable with conferencing based on like a student's explanation. And my answer to that would be, then you don't actually know what you're looking for then. Because if I design my content and I know exactly what I'm looking for, I'm not looking for the right answer. I'm looking for like key phrases or like an understanding that goes beyond just knowing the basic details. If you show me examples of that in your dialogue, I'm going to kick you out so you can move forward, so I can focus on the students who haven't yet gotten that language. Or explanation. Does that make sense kind of?
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. My other piece to that was, because as I was like kind of thinking, it goes along with why I love videos so much, because I can record them and they can rewatch them.
Yeah.
Would you, and I don't know, some districts you probably like have to record the meeting, with your kids. My thought is like, that's almost another support if you recorded it.
Yeah.
For your kids, for other kids to be able to maybe like go back and rewatch, or like to hear those conversations.
Yeah, that's totally going to be based on your district rules on that. Like if you're listening, I love that idea. Make sure that aligns to what your district is okay doing. Again, it's like, what can you control, what you not? If the district can let you do that, then students being able to listen back on conversations is valuable. As long as, again, I go back to the same video rule, it needs to be short. So if you're recording a conference with a student, it was like 25 minutes long, and the student really doesn't know why they're listening to it, I don't know if that would be valuable. But I agree. But if you had videos that were like students discussing this, and it was like a 5-minute video, and it was an optional video, but it was a video that you could recommend, being like, oh my God, I just had that conversation with Cadence. We actually recorded it. It's in that video. Like, there's a ton of resources I put in my grid that I intentionally label as like optional, because then if I'm talking with you and you're my student and I'm like, Megan, what a great question. Cadence had the same question. yesterday and we had this fabulous conversation. Will you go listen to that? And then after you listen to that recording, will you email me your biggest takeaway from that? So now I've redirected you to a source that's going to be valuable, but I didn't have to have the conversation again with you. And then I had you follow up with like any takeaways that you had too.
I like that. I actually saw, I'm trying to think, something that Candace said like sparked something for me. She said, well, she brings up Pear Deck, which I'm going to be honest, I've used it like once or twice, but I definitely do not know like enough about it to like speak on it. But she brought up like having a parking lot, and I'm almost thinking of if I did like even if it's like a level 1 parking lot, a level 2 parking lot, where like maybe, and I'm almost even thinking like it's more for me, like if like, let's say math is 8:30 to 9:30 and it's 9:15, 9:20, and we're getting ready to end math and you have a question, or you're working later on and you have a question, like you can post it there. And that's something that I can then address, whether maybe it's the same question, you know, I'm getting a lot of the same question. That's something I can address in a short video and quickly add into the grid for them to see. That's something I know I can address in the mini lesson the next day, or something that I can just record a Flipgrid or record a video and like email to that student.
So when you say parking lot, I think I'm thinking of a parking lot differently than you, but I really love that. And see, that's the problem with like these videos when I'm like so focused on what we're talking about and reading the comments. Candace, you're awesome. Are you thinking a parking lot would be like a place to house questions, or a parking lot would be where like students put their name to say they're waiting for your attention?
I was thinking of a place to post questions.
Okay.
I don't dislike though, although that's, I guess, what really the factor. Yeah.
Well, the reason I did that is because I know a lot of like schools that I visited with the grid method training, where a lot of them don't use like orange on the tracking page. And to say they need a conference, they put their name in a parking lot and the teacher gets ready to conference with them then and there. I think there's pros and cons to that for anybody thinking through that idea. Like, make sure logistically, if you have a lot of students in the parking lot, you want to be as educated as possible of what each student needs before you help them, because like to triage that becomes tricky. So instead of the parking lot, we use the triage system where they use colors. So again, it's like, it's all the same thing. It's students advocating they need you, and then you as the educator saying in your head, why do they need me? Who should I go to first? What's the speed in which I'm going to get to these students? Like, that's all internal, and you're just getting the data to make that decision. But if you're saying like a parking lot in terms of a space where students can pose questions that were unanswered for that day, and then you could go and answer them, that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, just saw Candace's comment thinking out loud to like, that just gives me a leg up on answering some questions that then they don't have to come in Tuesday. And maybe it is an I need to conference with them, or maybe it is something where it's a quick video response explanation, or maybe it's something I need to put into the mini lesson because there's been a lot of questions. So yeah, maybe.
So, okay, let me confirm a few things. So I'm still like in the mindset of your classroom, which is similar to mine in the sense that like kids need you remotely in the moment, but you just have way more kids that need you in that moment. If I start every day with a mini lesson, whether it's live or recorded, whatever, every single day my students will watch a mini lesson, and I'm going to assume during that time I'm busy, just for the sake of this conversation. Then for my students, they're going to do a Seesaw daily check-in, which is them identifying their emotional state before they get started. And actually, I don't know if that's going to happen before the mini lesson or after. I guess that would happen before the mini lesson. So JK, they're going to do that daily check. I'm doing that in Seesaw. They're just like circling an emoji face. It's super easy. And then they're going to do the mini lesson. And then from there, I want students to work on their grid. And then as they work on their grid, then they're ending with goal setting and reflection. So in the time that they're working on your grid, that's when you're doing conferencing. I feel like I need a chunk of time that is like teacher time conferencing, where I decide who I'm checking in with based on my teacher data, like whether I'm checking in with a student because they had a hard day yesterday or because I actually need to talk with them about math. Like, I think I'm going to give myself a chunk of time to be like, you can't schedule time with me, but I can schedule time with you. And then you can do a chunk of time we were conferencing either based on topic or based on signups. And then I feel like you need a chunk at the end right before goal setting and reflection for like catch up, because those conferences are not going to be short. That's the problem too.
Yeah, how do you like cut them? I mean,
yeah.
Which is why I kind of like the idea though of doing the topic, because I feel like it gives you a little bit more leeway of like, if you're conferencing by topic and then you feel like you need to conference more in depth, so then I guess does your teacher conference time come before or after that?
Okay, wait, I had another question for you. If you're conferencing by topic, I was thinking you conference by topic based on the slowest students level to the highest. I think you should do opposite, Megan. Here's my breakthrough that may not be anything by the time it comes out of my mouth. If you conference with students based on the highest learner first, as in like the farthest in the grid. So if they're like, if your farthest students on 2E and you do that conference first, and then your next group comes in who's like 2F, then if you are running behind, your 2E student could help coach your 2F student. No, I'm backwards. What comes before D? Yeah, because they would already have mastered it.
Yeah, I 100.
And then when your C student, your 2C group came in, you could actually pull a student from 2D and be like, hey, can you stay and help this group conference? And you could go like,
yeah.
Versus if you go the other way, then your 1A student and your 1B student comes in, your 1B has to wait because they already know the information from 1A. So 1A can't help 1B.
Yeah. No, I like that. And I actually think too, like sometimes it like it's a little confusing because I'm like, okay, well, if like you said, like if 2E is conferencing with 1D and is helping, like I technically have 4 other teachers from the other rooms that can be in those Zooms if I have to be like, okay, I'm going to like go conference with this chunk. This kid's going to run it. I just need you to like be the teacher in the.
Yeah.
Like, they're going to lead the discussion. That's even could work to my advantage.
I also like the idea. Okay, so when students are in class, whether in your class or other classes, can they interact with each other? Because then my answer would be, I know you have a convoluted answer, but just with me here, if your school wasn't the way it was. Because here, if you had a student who was on 2E and I was behind them, I could go to them for support in my classroom and not need you at all.
Yeah, and that's, I think, what I'm trying to figure out is because my kids can't get out of their desks, I want that to happen. It's more or less like, how can I, and so that's what I was thinking, like Flipgrid, but it becomes the same thing of that then has to constantly be, I wish it was something a light bulb would turn on. Like, at least that sounds like, like a button would turn on when somebody needs it.
Which is the tracking page.
Yes. And so now I'm almost thinking normally in the tracking page, if somebody, like, let's say I have 3 kids on red and I'm with somebody, my other kids all know that they can go if they know what they're, if they know what they're doing. So I think it's just working out how that can still happen.
Commenting on the tracking page, I think, is going to be the way you should do it. Because honestly, like if a kid can turn their thing red and say, hey, my question is that the video in 1B isn't working and so I can't learn, then a student can comment back and be like, refresh your page, goofy, because it worked fine for me. Or like, hey, I don't understand what a variable is, whatever. Like a student can be like, hey, a variable is a letter, da-da-da-da, and so they get their answer. So I think commenting in the tracking page is the way I'm going to go, and that's all archived for them. So,
yeah, that's true. And Candace brought up another good point too with the breakout rooms on Zoom. So
yeah.
If you're, depending on what your district, I don't know if we're going to be Zoom or like Google Meet. So depending on what you have, if you can, that's too, you can break them up by topic or even further if you need to.
Yeah. That makes sense to me.
You said because you and I are very much the same way on, I think, this portion of it, paper, pencil, for at least that's what I do for like my end of the level, like mastery, like let me make sure. again, in my boxes, like it's very much a quick, sometimes it's not even like with me, it's check the answer key or it's a get my signature, but it's something they can usually do on their own or check on their own. So what are you doing assessment wise? Like, since you are normally paper pencil, what are your thoughts? I don't care about the grade. I'm more concerned with like, I just want to be able to know that you have like when you mastered it.
I am not quite sure, and here's why. Again, what I can control versus what I can't. I didn't realize my district has newly announced that they can get paper supplies to students. So for example, I can print a packet and have my students pick it up or get it delivered to them. While I think that's so amazing, I am concerned that will have logistical ramifications. So I'm not banking on that. So a lot of what I think I'm going to do is me giving students resources that they can see virtually, like a packet page, and tell them you can print this or you can get one delivered, or I don't care if you use it, like you can write on a piece of paper that you have, like you can have a math notebook and just like more or less, because most of my things in my packets are more like guided notes or activities that aren't going to be the worst thing in the world if you like don't have that official page. Like you can just draft it out. Nothing that I do is like actually very specific to like, I really need the title to be at the top on the left-hand, whatever. It's not a thing. So I think I'm going to give them a lot of flexibility with that. But then on quizzes, I think I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to be, I say this cringingly, I'm going to be giving them access to the quiz. I've done this in the past and it's gone really well. So I'm like crossing my fingers. I'm going to give them access to the quiz so they can literally, when they're ready for the quiz, click on the quiz. And I'm going to have I'm going to have a space for them where they're going to say like, as a reminder, like, please don't use your notes on this quiz. You want to do this all on your own. Please don't use a calculator. And I'm going to tell them like, that is a request from your teacher, but obviously I probably can't control that to a certain extent, whatever. And then when the student's done with the quiz, either they've written it down on paper, they printed it or whatever, then they're going to conference with me. And I'm going to make sure that my conference questions, the things that I'm focused on, are not about did you get the answer right? Because if they use their notes on it, or if they used a calculator, if they did all that, but then also can explain it to me without having their notes in front of them and can solve the math problems, whether they use a calculator or not, like that's not a fight I'm picking this year, at least not right now. I know that's so not popular for math teachers. I know Megan, you and I are similar, but like, I know math teachers like are like vomiting listening to this video, like, oh my God, like, I get it. But like, for me, it's so much less about if you can do it in that moment in like high stakes assessment, and more so, if I give you this problem, can you do it? But can you also tell me how you did it, why you did it, what mistakes can come from that? Like I might even have like sample quizzes where in the midst of my conferencing with them, I might show them a problem that another student did and be like, hey, what are your thoughts on this student's work? Like, if we can have a conversation, I think I'm good.
Yeah, I agree. But I agree with you. You know, I think like even if the kids use a calculator, like if they can explain it to you, they understand whether they used a calculator or not. If they can explain it, they understand it.
And that's Candace. So she's like, how do you know it's the student taking the quiz, not the other person? Candace, I guess my mindset, and Megan, I don't know about you, but like, I won't, which is why I have to conference with them. Like, I won't know. It is totally possible. And I was totally the student who would cheat, by the way. I hated school. I was like the worst learner ever. And I would like do things all the time to get out of doing work. I was a professional at not doing work. But if my mom, she was mean. But if my mom like did my quiz for me, I'm still the one that has to sit on camera and answer the questions from the teacher. So that's why that conference means so much more than the quiz. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. But I think it comes down to like, I think back to, let's say May, when we had been doing this for a little while, and I could tell you, and I had been away from my kids for how long, and I could tell you when I was getting work from kids, which kids I was getting it from that they did it, and which kids I was getting it from that somebody very well helped them along. Now, if somebody is sitting there with them and helping them and not giving them the answer, I mean, obviously, I know a quiz is different, but I'm not going to be picky about that. That's why I think like we got to a point where you get to a point where you know your kids well enough. So you have to make sure that you're doing that at the beginning of the year. You have to make sure that you're spending the time to get to know your kids, because that's how you're going to know what they need and what sort of support they need and what they're capable of. But I think, like you said, it's really being intentional when you conference with them of what you're asking. Like if you, then I'm redoing some of my assessments right now. As I'm trying to be intentional about what's on it, because I need it to show me exactly what I want it to show me.
And I'm not asking like, oh, how did you do number 6? I'm like, oh, what was different from number 6 to number 5? Because in one, you had to borrow using subtraction, and the other one you didn't. And so if you don't know that, then it doesn't matter, because borrowing with subtraction is totally different. I need you to explain it to me. So like there's little things that, like, I'm not saying like, why is there a 3 here? It's more so like, when you did these problems, which one was the hardest? Because I know very clearly that there were 2 that were way harder than the other 4. And so I'm trying to get them to like think, like really think, what made it harder? Like what caused you to question your answer? Or sometimes I'm like, oh, these are all wrong. Like, can you tell me that they're not all wrong? And then like little things, like you're just asking questions to spark conversation. And your goal as the educator is to get something specific out of them so you feel confident that they're ready to move forward.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, Meghan, I don't know that we solved any of the world's problems, but we have been live for about an hour, which I feel like flew by, to be honest. It really flew by. I'm sorry for everyone listening. This video really wasn't so much about us like having all the answers, because even Meghan and I, we don't have all the information of what we can and can't do with our students yet, because we're just in the midst of starting our institute days and students being back. But I will say, like, this was helpful for me, Meghan, to at least think through logistically, like, even if it's just, this is still where my hurdles exist, but this is not where I have problems. Like, that's almost helpful to me to say, you know, in this element of classroom management, I feel super confident, but this element, I'm still figuring it out. Because if I can identify areas of success and areas of growth that I still need, then every live video from now on and every conversation I'm overhearing from my colleagues, I'm going to continue to take in data to be like, is that the question I'm still working on? No, I'm good. Or yes, I'm going to make sure that I get involved in that discussion. So something to consider for everybody.
Definitely. I love that.
All right. Meghan, thanks for chatting with me. It was super cool to see you.
Thanks for chatting with me. I know you didn't answer all of the world's questions, but you did answer a lot of mine, so I do appreciate it.
I don't really believe you, but maybe.
It's given me a lot to, I think, like, work. Now I think I can kind of like start really working through things. It's, again, sometimes I just need to talk out loud to somebody and like hear my own thoughts outside my head and be like, oh, okay. Or, you know, like, okay, I can tweak it this way. And so.
No, I totally agree. And I'm in the same boat where like, I feel like I need to go from the beginning, not only when I'm planning as an educator, but like eventually, and I think this will have to be next week, to be honest, when I have all the information that I possibly can from my district requirements and school requirements, is I really want to go through it as a student. Like, okay, I'm opening up my computer. I'm going to Google Classroom. I'm clicking on my Bitmoji, and my Bitmoji has a checklist. And the first thing I'm going to do is my daily check-in in Seesaw. And then I'm going to watch a mini lesson, and that's either going to be live or recorded. And then like, I want to go through, what does one section of my student's life look like? And how is that experience giving them different modalities of learning and different experiences and interaction with each other and interaction with me? Like that, I feel like needs to come soon as well.
I agree with you. It's when we have a little bit more information, you know, even right now, like we're brainstorming my 4 hours and I don't even know what my 4 hours in the day are going to look like. But, you know, it's when you have more information, you have more to work with. But, you know, getting that foundation, then kind of starting from there.
Well, and I like Jen's comment. Yeah, like we focus so much on math because Meghan and I are both math teachers right now. Meghan and I also coach teachers that are in totally different subject areas as well. It sounds like Jen also loves to help teachers, especially in ELA. So keep the conversation going. Sorry we focus so much on math, but this was very much a selfish live video for us more than anything else. So we appreciate each and every one of you. And we're going to pop off, but thank you for all that you do. And Meghan, you're the best. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Love chatting with you.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.